Hello, this is Gernge with another quick tip video. This one is all about color user data in Redshift. This is super powerful because of how many ways it can be used. It's really pretty limitless, so we'll just focus on a few examples today. There are more ways to use color user data than I can fit into one quick tip video, so we'll be calling this part 1. I'll show display color as an introduction, then move on to Mograph Color, which is an entire world of possibilities on its own. Using the random effector, we can give a unique color to individual clones. But that isn't all. We can use the same random effector to give variation to surface imperfections, for example. Starting off simple, we'll begin things with display color. Now I use this method when I've got one material and I want to apply it to multiple objects, but really only change the diffuse color. So for example, I've got this wooden tray with plastic pieces inside of it. Now inside of our material, it's a fairly simple plastic shader. We've got some max on noise in the bump and a little bit of a roughness map, and we have a surface imperfection to add some grunge. Cool, so we've got that set up. Now let's look at the user data. So we've got our color user data node, and this field here is where we input our attribute. In this case, we can use one of the pre-mades from the objects menu and then display color. So that's inputting a simple gray because on each of my objects, I'm using the display color right here. So I like this material and I've got it applied to all these objects, but I don't want to duplicate the entire shader just to change the diffuse color because that would be tedious and fairly inefficient. So with this display color, I can select, say, this object here, and I can make it a red value, and we'll see that update in the render view. I can then select one of its neighbors, and maybe make this yellow. So that's fairly straightforward, and it's working nicely. I think it's time to move on. Coming over to our second example, we've got some of the same plastic pieces, and instead of being hand placed, they're now inside of a cloner. You can see I've got some effectors like push apart and a random effector for position and rotation scale. Now we don't see any color variety. With our cloner selected though, we can make a new random effector, make sure to uncheck position, and check on color. Now in my opinion, it's a good idea to use multiple random effectors for each of your parameters. So for example, one for position and another one for Mograph color. The reason being we can now independently change the seed of the color versus the seed of the object's randomization. So this appears to be working quite well, although the colors are very wide ranging. To get better control over the color randomization, we can select our random effector, come back over here, and we can use fields color. Now coming over to our fall off or our fields menu, we can create a shader effector. And in the shader effector, we can select a noise. Depending on your specific scene and cloner setup, you might need to set up your field a bit differently. Now that I've got my shader effector with a noise and a gradient remap, things are looking pretty nicely over here. Now, if I want, I could make this transition from cyan color to a blue. In my particular case, with our color user data, I'm still using display color, but typically I'll change to Mograph Color. The last thing we'll cover in this setup is using this Mograph Color to help offset our surface imperfections. So for example, I can tell that on this clone here and this clone, the surface imperfections are the same. So what if I want to add some variety to those? We can use our color user data. It might just help to solo this. So I'm going to bring in a scalar ramp, connect that, and solo that. The scalar ramp is nice because I can use it to clamp some of the light and dark values in my particular scene. So jumping into my surface imperfections node, if I connect this scalar ramp out to the texture offset, we'll see that these now get some variation. And coming to our shader effector, in this case, changing the seed of the noise will allow us to get a different pattern or a different distribution on each clone. So I think that's a good place to wrap things up for part 1 of the color user data. I hope that you start to understand how powerful this is, especially if you work with Mograph objects. You can mix and match different attributes. I hope flipping through some of these other attributes gives you a clue into just how much is possible. Perhaps in part 2 is when we'll create our own custom attributes, which really allow us to push things even further. I do hope this information serves you well, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or subscribing for more quick tips. Thank you so much for watching.